Hi everybody, this is Russell. Thank you very much for tuning in. This video I will be showing you how I make a printing block to print my thank you cards. It's a fairly simple method that I developed using pre-cut foam letters that you get at the local craft store. And the first thing I did was I laid out a grid on a piece of paper. And I'm not going to go into the exact measurements because those will be determined on the different variations that you might want to use yourself. You might end up with different size letters or different words, and you might want to space them out differently. But this one I'm going to actually print two of them at once, and then once they're printed I'll cut them. And it's a relatively small thank you card, and that's what I'm looking for this time. And the birds are actually made from this foam that you get it's a foam sheet that you get at the craft store. And it's the same thickness as the letters, which is nice. And what I did, I drew the birds out just on a piece of paper. Then I cut them out with a pair of scissors. And then then I took this paper glue and glued them. It's like a temporary tack. It can be permanent if you use more of it. And glued them onto the foam and then cut them out. And then the paper came off, and then there they are on the grid. So everything fits in there real nicely, just the way that I wanted it. And so you can make yours any way you want. And then what I did was I took the grid that I made with the paper, and I laid it on the printing block and put carbon paper under there and then traced it, and then I ended up with the same grid on the printing block, which is a piece of plywood. So now what I'm going to do is place the letters onto the grid that I already made, but the thing is you want to place the letters on upside down and in reverse. And that's what I'm doing here. Okay, then what I do is I use this tacky glue. This is the Fast Grab tacky glue. And what I learned was when I first started using this, I tried to squeeze it out of the bottle like you're supposed to, like it's designed to do, but it was so difficult to get out that I finally realized that if I just put some in a container, a plastic container like this is a Plaid. The brand is Plaid Cubbywear. You have to get these online as far as I know. And these work really well. I use them for paint and this glue and several other things. And what I do then is use a painting knife and just a little tiny bit of glue. Put it on the letters. And this is just a temporary tack. I mean, it'll hold, but the thing is, what I will do is later on is I'll seal these with paint, and then they're not coming off at all, and it gives them a little bit more structural integrity. And the last printing block I made, I still have it. And, well, I've made quite a few of them, actually. But the thank you card one that I made, I still have it. And I've printed almost 200 cards with it so far. And it's still holding up fairly well. but I have it sealed with paint real well also. Okay, now that I have these glued down, upside down and in reverse, I'm going to glue this registration card on around the border to help me get it aligned when I actually do the printing. And what this is made out of, this is what's called mat board. They use it when they frame pictures, and it's the part that's inside of the frame itself, and then a lot of times they cut it on a bevel and then they stack them up and cut them on bevels, and makes a real nice border for a picture. And it also makes real nice for different kinds of crafts and so forth. So I already have this cut out and laid out, and I'm just going to glue that on with the tacky glue. Okay, now this, I don't really need to bring it the whole way out to the edge, because once I get it tacked down, then I'm going to go over the whole thing with paint to seal everything together. So carefully tack this down. Now allow that to dry for a few minutes, and I'll be right back with the paint. Okay, now that the glue is dried fairly well, the first thing I do before I paint on top of everything to seal everything in is that these letters have a fairly strong adhesive on the back of them, and it's covered with a piece of paper. So I remove all of the paper first. Now that I have all the paper peeled off that was protecting the adhesive, this adhesive is very sticky. These are made to stick on to other paper or, well, piece of leather or something like that, and they're meant to stay on there, and they work pretty good. So that's another thing that the paint will do, is it will seal the adhesive so that it doesn't stick onto your print that you make, and it also seals in the letters around the edges and the bird, and then it also seals this mat board so that if you get it wet when I go to clean this off, then the mat board's not going to warp and so forth, because it'll have enough paint on it to keep it from warping. And what I use is this is an artist quality paint. It's a heavy body acrylic paint, and it's made by Golden. I use Golden and Liquitex. They're intermixable. And I just need a little bit. For this procedure, I'm just going to water it down a little bit, or thin it down a little bit with water. A lot of times I use a fluid medium. And this is just a piece of plastic that I got from a orange juice container. You can get them off of a gallon milk container too. Or you could buy a pallet. Mix this real good, or very well, however you want to say it. Get the lumps out of it. Make it smooth. Try not to get bubbles in it. And then apply the paint. You want to kind of carefully, you don't want to move anything around. I'm kind of dabbing it instead of brushing it. So I want to try to work it into all the edges around all the letters. Okay, now that I have the first layer of paint on, it's worked in around all of the edges, around all of the letters, and around the mat board. And then I also did the edges to seal the mat board onto the plywood, the printing block. And I'll allow this to dry, and then off camera I'll put on another layer of paint, and that should be plenty. And then I'll be back and I'll show you how I make a couple of prints. Okay, now off camera, what I did, I allowed the first layer of paint to dry, and then I went over this registration mark right here with an ink pen to make it a little bit darker, and then I put another layer of paint on to seal the ink, and so it won't smear. It did smear a little when I put the paint on. I didn't allow it to dry long enough, but I don't have to worry about it smearing anymore. And so I can still see it with a second layer of paint on there. And I worked all of the paint into the edges and then around the edge here to seal in the mat board. So that way when I'm done with the printing process, I can rinse this off and just use the paintbrush to clean it off real quick, and it'll dry and it won't warp or anything, and then I can use it again next time. And the paper I use, this is cardstock. It's 65-pound cardstock, and they call it core dyed. That way, that means that it's dyed the whole way through, so there's not a white edge around it. You get these at the craft store. They come in 8.5 by 11 sheets. You can buy packs of 50 of them. Fairly reasonable. They're on sale quite a bit of the time. And then instead of using a brayer, they have a high density foam brayers that you use with acrylic paint. But I'm just using a paintbrush. This is kind of a small area to use a roller on. Or a brayer. It's a foam, it's a high density foam brayer is what it is. And then as far as the Baren goes, they're a little bit too big also, so I'm just going to use my hand. And the acrylic paint that I use is the Golden Fluid. And I'm using carbon black, and carbon black is the blackest of the black. And these little bottles are not cheap, but they go a long way and they do a very nice job. So that's what I'll be using. And I don't need much water. Doesn't take much. These go a long way. That's about 6 or 7 drops. I'll probably need more later. And then a few drops of water. You don't want to water it down too much. And mix it together so it's nice and smooth. And then very carefully Try to just get it on the letters and the bird. If you get some on the background, it doesn't hurt, but you don't really want to do that. A little more paint. Okay, that should be about right. Then I'll take the paper that I already have cut to the right size, and I put it right there on the registration mark. And then it should fall right in between the mat board. And then just rub it on. This takes a little experimenting too to get the right feel. And then lift it up. And that's not too bad for the first one. I could have used a little bit more paint. And on these, yeah, I'll probably take a little brush and fill that in. Let's try it again. Takes a little while to get these, the printing block kind of warmed up. Get it coated real good. And trying to get the right, I guess, viscosity. You don't want it too wet, you don't want it too dry. Okay, a little bit dripped down on the H here, so I'll just dig that out of there. Should be okay. Try it again. Pull it up. That was a little bit better. And then this, see that? Try to get the bubbles out of it. Try it again. And try not to get it on your hand, because that makes a mess. It's kind of a delicate process. Regular block printing is kind of delicate. This one should probably be pretty good. You get a feel for it after a while. And that came out fairly well. I'll leave that dry. We'll do one more. Those small little areas like the A's, you have to be careful not to get a bubble in there. Whoops. Had too much water on my brush. See, they get better as you go. Takes a little while to get warmed up. And then while I have the small brush out and the paint, I'll just go ahead and touch up a little bit here and there. Not really looking for perfection here, but that's how you do it. And then I'll allow these to dry, and which only take a couple of minutes, and then I'll cut them to size, and I'll be right back to show you how that works, and that'll be it. Okay, now while these cards were drying, I washed out the brush, and I also rinsed this off, and I used the brush to get the paint off of it. And as you can see, it's still sealed and stable. You don't want to get it real wet and dunk it in water, but I just rinsed it off, and then I took a paper towel and dried it off, and there it is. It's ready to go for the next time. And I've used these quite a bit in the past, and the previous thank you cards I was making, I've used that at least 200 times already. And after these get a little bit more cured and you get more paint on them, then they print a little bit better as you go. And as you get warmed up, and if you do 20 of them at a time, you get a little bit better as you go. And then after they're dry, I set this one up so that I could just cut them. These are fairly small. I wanted something a little bit smaller than the ones I had before. And just cut them off. And the top part is kind of going to be a wasted piece of paper, but that's mainly for, I put that on there for the registration. It helps with the registration of the, keep everything straight. And that's how it works. So if you're interested in videos like this, stay tuned, and thank you very much for tuning in. See you next time.